Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ADID session, and I'm pleased to be with you today as the former chair of MOIC, and it is my pleasure to be involved in this session as it was a labor of love through the MOIC committee. We recently, this designation was passed and implemented and actually created through the MOIC committee. And so it took about maybe 4+ years to get to the legislation floor. And we were pleased to have this passed January 2019, and it was implemented August 2020. So we're in our first year of this position or this role for ADIDs. And we thought it was important as a committee that you receive the support that you need and to get your information from you about what support you need to help you in these roles, because we know it's new and we know that we have people from all over and all sorts of positions that are serving in this role. So today is the first of many. And we'd like to just talk through the sessions. Today, we're going to have some information given to you from a result of the surveys that were done and that you completed, that the Ncaa staff, inclusion staff, and research staff have put together for you. And then we're going to have some information given to you with our partners and MOAA and DICE. That will talk to you about what type of support is out there and available to you as we move along this session. What I like to do in the interest of time is to introduce our current chair and my successor as chair of MOIC. And also, I'm proud to say that she is one of my former student athletes from NC State University, Marquetta Dickens, who is the current head women's basketball coach at Peace University and also the current ADID. And I'd like to give her an opportunity to welcome you all.
So thank you all for joining us today to learn and engage more about your important role as an athletic diversity and inclusion designee. The conversation about the need for ADID started around 2018, and I'm sure pretty much before that as well. But over the years, after losing some teeth on what was originally desired for the designee to be, and after much hard work from MOIC committee members such as Dean Freeman Patton, who you just heard from, and Jose Rodriguez, the designee, was finally approved by all divisions. That approval reaffirmed the importance of recognizing diversity and inclusion, as inclusion is a key principle of the Ncaa. The designation also ties to efforts surrounding the Ncaa presidential pledge. However, all of us who do this work, whether it be a calling or, hey, you're the new ADID, know that this role is very, very important and means much more than just passing down some general information about diversity and inclusion. We know the value that it brings to our institution and the overall better student athlete experience that it yields to our athletes, and the inclusive and brave workspace that it can bring to us as coaches and administrators. Therefore, we are passionate about what we do, even if we have no idea just how to do it yet. So I'm sure some of you are like, how does she know my life? And there's some silent giggles. Well, I'm a trained therapist as well, and so I've been trained to hack brains for a living, so it's okay. But no, seriously, we understand that this role is new. We know that it looks different depending on what campus that you're on, and much like the SWA designee in its beginning phases needed much educational awareness, support, resources, and information so that those designated could turn into what the role has meant for women athletics today. Women in athletics today, I'm sorry. So the MOIC is committed to supporting ADIDs, and this is, of course, like Gina said, this is the first time of many to engage with us as we continue to try to be effective and efficient and finding ways to optimize this important position. We have established an ADID subcommittee, and the ADID remains an agenda item and will remain one as long as needed. I'm naturally a rebel simply by showing up as my whole authentic self. So I'm thrilled to welcome you here and engage with some amazing warriors and racial and social justice advocates together. And together we can and we shall ensure that coaches, administrators, and student athletes feel included, celebrated, and valued in the spaces that they're in. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marquetta. Now I'd like to introduce our Ncaa staff, who has been very supportive in this process and putting together some information for you and putting together the survey that you completed before this session. And I'd like to first introduce Kelsey Gorganis, who's the Ncaa Research Assistant Director. And then we will have Ncaa Blair Hackworth, Director of Inclusion, to talk to you about some recommendations after the information is presented about the survey.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take a second now to share my screen. As you all know, in collaboration with the Office of Inclusion, Ncaa Research partnered to design a survey to better understand the role and programmatic needs of campus and conference ADIDs, athletics, diversity, and inclusion designees. We administered the survey online, and it was designed to be taken via phone, tablet, or computer by all ADIDs in each division, and it was open for about 3 weeks from April 26th to May 17th. We had 318 campus ADIDs and 24 conference ADIDs complete the survey. 35% of the ADIDs on D1 campuses completed the survey, 23% in Division 2 and 29% in Division 3. This is pretty typical for what we see in response rates for our administrator surveys. Throughout the presentation, you'll see some results reported by campus and conference. And in some cases, the conference data is not disaggregated by division, simply due to small numbers. As you can see, we only had 9 in Division 1, 6 in Division 2, and 9 in Division 3. When we look at the number of responses by race and ethnicity, we did have a pretty diverse representation of ADID respondents participate in the survey. But the majority of campus and conference ADID respondents identified as either white, Black, or multiracial. In terms of gender identity, a majority of campus and conference ADIDs identified as female. At the campus level, we did have a few respondents identify as non-binary and several preferred not to answer. But in terms of sexual orientation, while a majority of respondents identified as straight, there was still a significant proportion identifying as lesbian, gay, bisexual, queer, questioning, or some other identity. We asked our campus ADIDs to select their primary role on campus, and among respondents, athletics administrators was the highest endorsed primary role of ADIDs, with 88% in Division 1, 53% in Division 2, and 43% in Division 3. But looking at D2 and D3 specifically, we also had a notable number of respondents serving either as coaches or within their campus DEI offices. We also asked our conference ADIDs to select all roles that apply to their conference office job duties. And among our 24 respondents, it really varied by division. In Divisions 1 and 2, nearly all respondents were serving within compliance and or internal operations capacities. In Division 3, 2/3 were serving in compliance, external operations, or internal operations. And then another 44% were also involved in public media relations duties. We also had respondents in Division 3 select other, and those other were serving as conference commissioner or executive director. So we asked several questions around what the role of the ADID entailed, including level of engagement, utilization, and some of the responsibilities. And our key findings were that the level of engagement in athletics department and conference office DEI efforts was higher for respondents after taking on the ADID role. Feelings of being utilized in the ADID role on campus and in conference offices varied across division. Some of the responsibilities of our campus ADID respondents, they indicated that they most often included the Athletics, Diversity and Inclusion Committee, as well as the athletics specific DEI education, programming initiatives, strategic planning. But the real difference that we saw with responsibilities is whether the ADID served in a leadership or support role in these efforts. It looks very different across divisions. Typically, you'll see in the data here in a moment, Division I respondents were much more likely to serve in a lead role, while Division II and Division III respondents were generally serving more in a support role in these DEI efforts. Respondents in conference offices most frequently indicated responsibilities in DEI education, DEI strategic planning, SAC efforts, and Conference Diversity and Inclusion Committee. So the feelings of being utilized in the ADID role in campus and conference office, as I mentioned, it really varies across division. And you can see here in this table, Division I respondents reported the highest agreement at the campus level, and Division III respondents reported the highest agreement at the conference level with 56%. Division II respondents at the campus and conference level reported much lower levels of agreement on their feelings around being utilized in their role. So this slide shows the campus ADID role in DEI programming and education. The gray portion of the bar represents respondents that reported not being engaged in each effort or the specific effort just was not available. The light blue represents respondents reporting being involved in the specific effort in a support role. And then the dark blue represents those reporting leading the effort. And what we found is that 97% of D1 campus ADID respondents indicated having either a lead or support role in athletic-specific DEI education and programming initiatives, as compared to 75 to 80% of respondents in D2 and D3. Division I respondents were much more likely to serve in these leading roles, as you can see in the darker blue portion of the bar. While Division II and Division III respondents were generally serving more in a support role in these DEI efforts. And then in terms of SAC-led efforts, generally ADIDs across divisions were more likely to serve in a support capacity, although involvement in these efforts was much higher among the Division I respondents. This slide shows the campus ADID role in DEI athletics committees and partnerships. And we found that 85% of Division I campus respondents and 2/3 of D2 and D3 respondents indicated either serving in a lead or support role with the Athletics Diversity and Inclusion Committee. Nearly 70% of Division I respondents reported leading this effort, as compared to about half in Division II and III. And then many ADIDs respondents across divisions reported being involved in campus partnerships as well. We found that over 90% in Division I and about 3/4 in D2 and D3. Nearly 60% of Division I ADIDs reported leading these partnerships, as compared to 26% in Division II and 20% in Division III. And then at the bottom of the slide, in terms of athletic search and hiring efforts, generally ADIDs across divisions were more likely to serve in a support capacity, although involvement in these efforts was much higher among our D1 ADID respondents. And then lastly, in terms of ADID responsibilities, this is showing the DEI strategic planning efforts. More than 90% of Division I campus respondents and exactly 70% of Division II and Division III respondents indicated that their responsibilities included athletic-specific DEI strategic planning. 2/3 of D1 ADIDs reported leading these efforts, as compared to 38% in Division II and 32% in Division III. And then in terms of campus-wide strategic planning, generally ADIDs across divisions were more likely to serve in a support capacity. And then we found at the conference level, more than 90% of respondents in conference offices indicated serving in either a lead or a support role in efforts related to DEI education, strategic planning, and SAC efforts. And another 80% indicated responsibilities in the Conference Diversity Inclusion Committee and the Search and Hiring Committee. Specifically in terms of taking on a leadership role, more than 60% of respondents working in conference offices reported taking a lead on efforts related to the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. And more than half of respondents indicated leading efforts in education, strategic planning, and SAC related efforts. And then just in terms of what we found with collaboration and budget, we found that perceived awareness, we asked ADIDs what % of their athletics department was aware of their being in the ADID role, their designation of being ADID. And perceived awareness within athletics departments on campus was lowest among our Division II respondents, as well as those serving in their primary roles external to the athletics department. Perceived awareness in conference offices was lowest among our Division I conference respondents. And then respondents with primary roles internal to the athletics department reported meeting more frequently with athletics department staff and coaches, while those external to the athletics department reported meeting more frequently with collaborators across campus. And then in terms of budgeted funds, the availability of these funds varied widely across division for campus and conference office DEI efforts, and I'll show you that data. So we asked respondents how frequently they're meeting with groups and individuals across campus. You can see the gray bar shows respondents reporting meeting with each individual or group less than monthly. The light blue bar shows those meeting at least monthly but less than weekly. And then the dark blue bar shows meeting weekly or more. And we found that the primary role on campus, specifically whether that role is internal or external to athletics, is more related to the frequency of who these ADIDs are meeting with on campus than division is. But of note, just so you can have an idea of by division who is internal to athletics and who's not, 94% of respondents on D1 campuses, 72% on D2 campuses, and 70% on Division III campuses reported being internal to athletics and also serving in the ADID role. But in terms of meeting with athletics administrators specifically, respondents with primary roles internal to athletics reported meeting much more frequently with athletics department staff. 70 to 72% of respondents internal reported meeting with administrators, you see on this slide, weekly, and another 19 to 22% reported meeting at least monthly. And then respondents with primary roles internal to the athletics department also reported meeting much more frequently with coaches and student athletes. 41% of those internal to athletics reported meeting with coaches weekly, and another 50% reported meeting with coaches at least monthly. More than half of those internal to athletics reported meeting at least monthly with SAC, as compared to about 16% of those external to athletics. And then while those internal to athletics are still more likely to meet with FARs at least on a monthly basis, the ADID respondents with roles external to athletics generally were more likely to have a higher meeting frequency with those partners outside of athletics. And then in terms of meetings with collaborators outside of athletics, respondents with primary roles external to the athletics department reported meeting more frequently with their campus DEI office, as well as the president or chancellor. Okay, and finally, we asked respondents about the availability of budgeted funds. And as you can see in this table, responses varied widely across division for campus and conference DEI efforts. At the campus level, 41% in Division I, 22% in Division II, and 33% in Division III reported that funds are available. But then at the conference level, 5 out of 6 respondents in Division II said that funds were available, and as low as 3 out of 9 respondents in Division I said that funds were available. But in the note at the bottom of this slide, we did ask in an open-ended question. We asked respondents who indicated that there were budgeted funds available, how much was available in the annual budget for DEI efforts. And the responses varied widely at the campus and conference level. We had monetary values from anywhere from 100 to 100,000. Typically, the monetary values were in between the 5,000 to 50,000 range, but it really varied. But we also had responses of not knowing or as needed basis or a preference not to answer. So on that note, I will turn it over now to Ncaa to discuss desired support and resources and some of the findings from the survey related to this and how we move forward.
Thank you, Kelsey. Good afternoon or midday to you all. Thanks for joining the ADID session. As Dina and Kelsey stated, my name is Ncaa Blair-Hackworth. My pronouns are she, her, hers. So getting to part 2 of the survey data and looking at support and resources, and this information will also help us in looking at how we will optimize the ADID designation. So in terms of interest in Ncaa resources, many of you said you wanted D&I related webinars. So, overall, in this broken down by conferences and campus, we say a large percentage of individuals would like webinars. And then we'll look at ADID sessions at the Inclusion Forum. This was, of course, our first year providing this, and we hope to provide this in future Inclusion Forum sessions as well. But we also know that you probably want more times to connect outside of the Inclusion Forum session. And then a resource list of ADIDs is also something that was stated from the survey that would be helpful. And then diversity, equity, inclusion related online modules. So those are 4 areas in which you all expressed a lot of interest in. And so one of the things that we're going to do is after this inclusion forum, we're looking at the data even more closely and working with our MOIC colleagues and teammates to create an ADID strategic plan moving forward based off of survey data, and where we will be implementing some webinars, of course, providing the ADID session at Inclusion Forum. The resource list for ADIDs is a little tricky. I mean, we have that information and you can do it on the Ncaa directory, but trying to figure out how do we make sure that we have the correct information, because some campuses don't necessarily update when there are changes and things. That's what we've found here recently, particularly with the surveys, as many individuals reached out and said, hey, I'm the ADID, but I didn't get the information, or I'm the new ADID, but we're looking at ways to provide those things that you was stated on the survey. So in continuing to move forward the presentation, the likelihood of using the Ncaa resources in terms of online modules, we still see overall within each division still a pretty good high percentage of people saying that they would utilize the online modules. We saw a slight decrease in D2 in terms of conference ADIDs. When it comes to handouts and print resources, overall in D1, more ADIDs said they would utilize that number. It's a little decline in Division 2, Division 3, and then within Division 1 and Division 2 conferences, but Division 3 conference ADIDs said that they would like handout resources. And then when it comes to a live webinar, 79% of D1 ADIDs would like live webinars, were 72% D2 and 65% D3. We see a decrease, large dip within D1 conference ADIDs, 67% for D2 and 89% for D3. And then when it comes to in-person sessions, those numbers are not as high, and we probably recognize because we've all learned how to move forward in the virtual space. And then also in terms of funding, I'm sure maybe some of the reasons, but 62% within Division 1, 59% within Division 2, and 46% within Division 3. and then in the 30s and low 40s within Division 3 in terms of conference ADIDs. So we will keep that in mind, and particularly starting out because we're building in terms of how we're going to and continue to provide support for you all, that we know that those will first start, particularly within the online space. And if right now for next year's inclusion forum, we have a tentative, pending anything may come up with COVID, for that to be in Indianapolis, but we're also looking at how do we provide a virtual experience. And we know just based off of survey data that for the ADID special session during inclusion forum, even if it's in person, it still may be beneficial to provide that in a virtual aspect. So this is some other information that we received. A lot of themes that came up in terms of further define the expectations and requirements of the ADID designation. For example, one person said, I would like some validity to my role and possible mandates of what I should be doing. I feel like I have, as if I have a title with literally no use. I think the Ncaa can do a better job of sharing what this designation should be. It was added to my title without training, pay increase, or real expectations to what it should be. And one of the things that we do know is that it's important for, and we'll probably get to this in the Q&A piece of how the designation came to be within each of the divisions. And so we couldn't, as MOIC and Dina may want to speak to this a little bit as well, provide as much structure as MOIC originally wanted to. So now we're trying to figure out how to do that in the back end in a way that campuses and conferences will support that, because we had to think about various institutional types and fundings and things like that. But we do hear you, and we're looking to see how we can provide more kind of expectations or things around that. The other piece is enhanced internal support. So getting support from other administrators, creating a resources that helps guide campus leaderships on how to interface and support and utilize this role. And that's something, an area that we're also looking to help provide. And when we do communicate with you all, we're also sharing a lot of that information to athletic directors and presidents and chancellors. The other piece is encouraging athletics to educate coaching staff about the importance of the ADIDs. And we hope to have a website soon that just focuses on ADIDs, but resources as well. But we need to get some more information on there so that the website can be robust. Also, again, other resources, best practice sharing, mentoring, networking opportunities. We may, depending on how it goes, do a networking. We had over 500 individuals sign up for today. And so if you know anything about Zoom, you can't do a breakout room when you have 500 people, even though we don't have 500 on this call. So we had to move that from this particular time together, but providing that, providing financial support, and again, elevating the designation to a full-time role is something else that has come up during the survey piece.
So there were a couple questions regarding trainings and if there will be more. Some requested twice a month or more, or things like that. So I think it's clear that there are a number of different roles that people hold on their campuses. And there's also a concern that one person can't handle it all. And so, and like you said, Ncaa, I'll give just a little bit of background on stuff before you kind of address those issues. But the designee was put forward to be a point person initially, and not necessarily to do all of the DE&I work. So the work should be done by more than one person, but the designee is really somebody to help facilitate that, to be that point person to, but it became a contact person is how it was passed. And we, to full transparency, we had to water it down a little bit to get it through legislation and to be able to have this designee. And so we're trying to do, like I said, on the back end, add more teeth to it. to where we're able to help hold our institutions and conferences accountable to DE&I work, but it doesn't mean that you do it yourself. Ncaa or Kelsey, do you want to add to talk about the training opportunities, and maybe that's also something that Marquetta can talk about as well?
So definitely, one of the things that we'll say is that part two, that we have some guest speakers, and we're going to be working with 2 organizations to help provide different trainings and levels of education. The first thing is just kind of understanding what types of training. So based off, is it more about what my role is? Because we've had some individuals to say, hey, like, I don't know anything about really ED&I. I've just put in this role. And so if you want to share in the chat, you can put that in the chat of what types of training you want to provide, because one of the things that we're trying to think about is, you know, are we providing like baseline education about ED&I? Moa hosted a event with AD&Is about 2 months ago. And so some individuals said, hey, we want some basic kind of we want some basic information about diversity, equity, inclusion. And some said, hey, I want some more information about what I should be doing in my role. And so we're trying to figure out specifically what that looks like. We had some open-ended questions at the survey that talked about some particular types of programming, but if you didn't get a chance to take the survey and you want to put it in the chat, please do as well, so that we can make sure that we're providing what you need. And we definitely hear you in terms of that.
Yeah, I was just going to just briefly chime on, piggyback onto Ncaa and say that we do have an open-ended question on the survey that potentially you all may have provided some details related to programming, but feel free to add in, because we haven't had a chance. Like I said, the survey closed in May 17th, so we haven't had a chance to go through every single comment. We will take all the comments that you have right now too and save them.
What is the level of accountability for athletics departments to utilize their ADID on their campus?
So if I'm honest, I'm not sure. I don't necessarily think that there is a high level of accountability. I mean, we encouraged everyone to designate their ADID in August, and we had some that waited, you know, a while to do that. I think that that's an opportunity for MOIC to work with us to see, you know, what more can we do as an association to put some more to that. You know, we recognize that having this role is one step, right? But there's definitely more things that need to be done. And we're trying to pattern a little bit after the SWA. And we know it took a minute for the SWA to come aboard, not making excuses, but working, you know, at the association. Those accountability pieces can be a little tricky, but I see Marquetta has her hand up, so she can.
And so as you all heard, this is my first year as ADID as well. And so I think it's a couple of things that I'm hearing, and I understand the anxiety in terms of wanting more training, wanting to know what we're doing, because it's important work. And I think that's very, very important. For me, I think that the accountability piece, especially in year one, because it is tricky when it comes to accountability in terms of a whole association, is what I found is that we have to be the ones to hold our institutions accountable. They're going to listen to us before the Ncaa. They listen to anything from the Ncaa at first anyway. It starts with us. And so I think we know who's who, as my mentor used to say, who's who in the zoo. You have to figure that out on campus. And I guarantee you figure that out, especially diversity and inclusion is something that's very important and a hot topic right now. And so you really have the ability to hold your institution accountable for the most part, at least your department. And so like for me, in terms of training and those type of things, I think it's important that all of us in this first year, this year one, is we are in a unique position to be able to voice what's important to us. If we feel like we need more teeth, remember that the Ncaa is membership led. And so you can really help, because as Dina said, this started out and wanting to be more, but you know, had to water it down. And the reason I think we had to water it down a bit, and this was before we got here, but understanding how the legislation works is you have to convince people why this is important in terms of money, why it is important in terms of resources. Here's the resources that we have, and things like that. So that's just kind of how I see it. And I look forward to kind of just reading the chat and hearing some more stuff, some good stuff.
I have a question that says, are there any conferences that have added ADIDs from their respective institutions and conference level ADID together. So if I'm reading this correctly, having a group within the conference level of ADIDs, and similar to the President's Council and the Athletic Directors Committees.
So we're actually looking to make that recommendation to conference offices, and even saying when you're having conference meetings, are you inviting ADIDs from your campuses to work with your conference office? For example, next week, I think I'm doing a presentation for D3 Commissioners Association, and so that's one of the recommendations that we'll be putting out. And again, I think that one of the things we're working on is, again, best practices for athletic departments and conferences, and that's one thing that we can list of suggestions to make sure to help that ADIDs are in the room and they're being utilized to network with each other, but so that others can see them in various spaces.
Yeah, it looks like the American Conference has a group that they put together. Thanks, Marlon, for that. Another question is, are you considering the recommendations from the white paper Lead 1 D&I committee completed for the accountability piece?
So we are looking at the D1 that we actually had a meeting with Dr. Gregg at DD Mayo in leadership development and Amy Wilson. So again, it's just more about putting some things in place, but we are looking at those recommendations to be able to utilize them as we move forward. What is the definition for an ADID, Athletics Diversity Inclusion Designee? This person is the primary contact for information related to initiatives, programs, and resources from the Ncaa National Office, specifically from diversity-related committees and the Office of Inclusion. And then we say that at the direction of a campus or conference office leadership, the ADID participates in training and development to enhance and increase competencies associated with leading and facilitating inclusion initiatives. And that is recommended that the ADID be involved in discussions about policy changes and the hiring processes within athletics. And so we have that's on our website. It's right now under the MOIC page. Again, we'll be working over the summer to early fall to build a page that specifically says labeled Athletics Diversity Inclusion Designee. I will also say we're looking at how do we optimize the presidential pledge, which I think we have, if my numbers are correct, like 86% of chancellors and presidents have signed this pledge about a commitment for diverse hiring. But they've signed that, but we've got to put some more teeth to that as well. And so we're looking at how can we encourage chancellors and presidents to utilize the ADID on their campus to help in that way in terms of hiring and recruitment, because that's also a part of one of the main functions. And so actually right now in the room, well, it's happening virtually, but my colleagues are in the room beside me. We have the presidents and chancellor session going on, and they will be talking about ADIDs in that session.
It seems like most of the questions are surrounding training and around getting together as groups, essentially, as cohorts. So maybe that's something Marquetta and the inclusion department can work on. But I wanted to, if it's okay with you, Ncaa, transition into our partners, because I think they can answer some of these other questions about actual DE&I work and their connection to that.
But one of the questions asks about how does the equity, diversity, and inclusion review that is required to occur every 4 years tie into the ADID role, and that's within Division I, where it's required that the Division I does an ED&I review. So we're working on that this summer of like some best practices and tips for the ADID review. And we will have in there about the ADID helping to support that work because, right, and I hear you, one person can't do it and the role wasn't designed for one person to do. It's just about like, how do you help spur change and influence and empower others to join you along that way. But the ED&I review best practices and some tips will be coming out from the Office of Inclusion by late summer, early fall, and it will have something about ADIDs in that. So thank you, Dan.
All right, next I'd like to bring forward our partners from MOAA and DICE. We'll have Stan Johnson from MOAA to come and discuss how MOA supports ADIDs and some of the initiatives they've already done and will continue to do in this space. Welcome, Stan. Stan is the Executive Director of MOA. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today and talk a little bit about MOA and what we're doing to support that role. We are supportive of the role. We've been supportive of it since it first was inception, was brought up and began the discussion at the MOIC level. We've always advocated and wanted to make sure that this role was more than just an information passing role, because that was something that we didn't want to see. MOA has it began its process of looking at how can we support the ADID, and one of the things we did in our Education Professional Development Committee was develop a series of webinars, especially at the beginning of this process, where people were hungry for information, as you are, and I see in all of the chats, people want more and more education. So the first part of that process was to basically look at what is the role of the ADID and how do we define that role, so to speak. The second webinar we had was what are some of the best practices out there and the things that are going on. And the third part was where do we go from here? And all of it was using professionals. And Angel Mason just showed up, and that's my partner here, and she can talk a little bit about each one of those that we had as a part of the MOA session. Angel?
Thanks, Stan. So, as Stan said, one of the major things that we've done this year through MOA is really work through defining the ADID designation. And a big part of that has been making sure that people understand it's a designation, much like the SWA designation. And so much of what we've heard from our membership was that, well, how do we define that role, since it can be defined in a multitude of ways on different campuses? And so we took the information and feedback from our memberships and we designed the 3-part webinar. As Stan indicated, the 3-part webinar started out with, where we are right now, ADID in comparison to DEI, and not that one was greater than the other, but how do we define the differential between individuals that have been designated to do very tough work and individuals that are skilled educators and practitioners in the space of DE&I. And so we spent the first webinar in that space. And then our second event was what's next? Where do we go from here, to try and provide some baseline tools for how you can have these difficult conversations with your direct supervisor, your athletic director, whomever is making the decisions, if you're not actually sitting at the decision-making table. And so that's where much of the focus has been on those webinars. Where we are moving as well is as we move into the MOA Symposium, we're continuing to gather feedback from our membership, and we have recordings of all of those sessions. Another thing that's on the table for MOA is we're beginning to build lists of information so that people can have a standard resource. And so that's going to be much of this committee, as far as MOA's subcommittee, work over the summer in preparation for the fall. And so as our members are giving us more feedback, as we expect following the symposium as well, we want to be prepared to give people at least a launching pad if they don't have one already. So that's a quick kind of overview of the ADID work that we've been doing thus far in the current case, right? If you have resources, please share them with us so that we can get them to the greater membership. Be involved, right? Serve on one of our committees, become a member, serve on a committee, be able to be a resource hand in hand with other individuals across the membership. Connect on social media, right? As things are taking place, as you're seeing great things, share them, connect in that way. And we also have a program, a mentor-mentee program. And this is another great space for you to connect with someone that's doing this difficult work, especially with those that we have that are true practitioners in the DE&I work, to be able to give you baseline help to begin to encourage your student athletes to take leadership roles, to be able to set parameters so that people in your department know that this is work that everyone is responsible for and not the one individual that was designated the ADID. So I know I spoke very quickly, but I wanted to get as much out as possible. And we will have time at the end for a couple of questions between myself and Stan.
Stan, any additional thoughts?
Yeah, one of the things I want, you said this earlier when we talked about this ADID role, and I've heard from our webinars, and I was on each one of them, not all the time, but I heard some interesting things. One is, how do we help this role become, and I'm not going to take credit for this, whoever said it, become from being transactional to being transformational? And that's important. How do we go from words to putting put things in action? And that's was something that we have to do with this role to make sure. The second part of it is that one of the things has to be understood is, while this is a designated role, everybody still has responsibility for diversity and inclusion, EDI, on the campus. This should not be abdicated to this person now because someone is there. And that's their role now. And I think that's important for you who are ADID people, that will understand that you don't have to take on all this responsibility. It takes leadership from the top. Your CEO, your AD, and those individuals should be saying, this is important. And that's why you get your support. You have to have their support. If you don't have their support, you're going to find a lot of pushback. Because when you come down the hall, people are going to know what you're coming down the hall for. And this is an uncomfortable feeling for a lot of people. I've worked in this space for 30 some years, and it's uncomfortable for people knowing that you're coming down the hall to talk about EDI. And so be aware of that, and you have to have that support from the top. So I think those are the key things that will help you be successful. And of course, the resources that have to be put with it. When I saw that someone is $100, that's not going to get it. You're going to be fighting to get some things done, and you're going to be awful creative to get things done. But I know you, as individuals that are taking on this role, you're going to be good at doing it.
Thanks a lot, Stan. And so now at this time, I'd like to invite our members from DICE, which is the for DICE. So we have DeJuan Baker, who's Associate Athletics Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at the University of Colorado. And then we also have Sheridan Blanford, who's Associate AD for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for the University of Washington. And they're going to talk about how DICE can also be supportive and be partners with ADIDs and be a resource to you. Thank you and welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dina. So incredibly excited to be here with all of you. This is one of the sessions I've been looking forward to, because it's always great to be in community with people who are doing what I do, what DeJuan does. So we're just super thankful to have this space and just provide you with a little bit of information about DICE. We had to come up with a fun acronym because that's what we do in college athletics. So DICE stands for Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Council of Excellence. So our board of directors, before we dive into what we do, so DeJuan and I are the co-founders, and then we have a current board of directors right now who have been incredibly instrumental in helping us get DICE to where we are today. We want to make sure that we give them a shout out. So it's DeJuan and I as the co-founders, and then additionally Prince Moody from Ohio State, Thomas Harris from the U of A or University of Arizona, and then Nick Saylor, who is from Providence College. So before I kick it to Dewan to really unpack what we are and what we do, just an overview. So we are here to set out to discuss, evaluate, and create tangible solutions that drive that intentional growth, or that transformational growth that Stan was just hinting at, toward increased diversity, equity, and inclusion excellence within college athletics, but then sport broadly. So we're really here to very, very people-driven, this position-driven, to make sure that we are equipped, have support, feel connected, can lean on one another, and are doing so with this platform of DICE. So I'll hand it off to you, Dwayne.
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate it. As Sharon had mentioned, we created DICE so that we could try our best to really connect with one another. And so typically what happens with DICE and how it kind of operates is that DICE is comprised of DEI professionals in sport. So whether you have the title itself as Diversity and Inclusion Director, Coordinator, Vice Chancellor, whatever term that you might use or have on your campus, or if you're just the ADID and you have additional responsibilities, we created it so that we can connect with one another and be able to converse. As Sharon mentioned, we do have a board of directors, and we were kind of the initial group that kind of started this idea. In addition to that, we have subcommittee leads, and then we have general body members. And we meet on a monthly basis to discuss, evaluate, and create tangible solutions around DEI. And so our subcommittees and our board of directors will create goals, and we try our best to try to implement those or try to carry out, again, tangible solutions to what those goals are. So during a typical DICE meeting, we meet on a monthly basis, and we will have a topic that is determined by either us as the board of directors or our general body members. And some of the topics that we've talked about over the past year have ranged from how do you start, becoming a DEI and start talking about a strong foundation of DEI. We've even got so detailed into talking about how do you create more inclusive content from a communications and a marketing and a fan engagement perspective. We talked about how to engage with donors in regards of how your DEI plans or your DEI strategy and how it is that you interact with your fundraising or the people who are donating the money to your university and your athletic department, how to have that conversation, all the way down to how is it that we operationalize this role, and how do we make sure that we align even committees that we're starting. And so every single meeting, there's some type of takeaway that we have and some type of resource that we provide to our members. And we try our best to be able to share those in between the meetings as well. And so when you sign up to be a member of DICE, you get access to a website. And within that website, we post the monthly minutes and the monthly resources to be able to say, hey, here's what we talked about last meeting. And in between those meetings, we're also reaching out to one another to say, hey, my budget is coming up. Who has a good budget for me to share? And then we'll share that. We've talked to individuals about what it's like to transition, because we've had some ADIDs transition into full-time roles doing this, and we've had those conversations with them. We've even had conversations with ADs to say, hey, I want to create this role as a professional that is doing this role right now. What is necessary to make sure that this person is set up for success? And so for us at DICE, it's been a very, very heavy and packed year in regards to what we're trying to do. And the way that we got here really started at the Inclusion Forum. And so Sheridan and I have been in our roles for, I would say, close to almost 5 years now, not at our prospective universities, but just in general. And we were at the Inclusion Forum in 2019. And Sheridan and Stan, share a pre-existing relationship, and we're having some conversations about what this would look like. And when we were at the Inclusion Forum, she said, hey, how many of us are out there, people that are doing DEI work within athletics? And at that time, the answer was very, very slim. The ADID wasn't passed yet. We knew that the Ncaa was working on it with the MOIC committee, and we knew that there were some positions that were getting ready to come open, but again, it was really, really small. And so over the course of that summer and fall, we started to try to connect with as many as we could to try to have some small groups and start having some discussion. And we tried to operationalize this. And fast forward to the summer, we were in the process of creating a website and really trying to get some name recognition and try to build what DICE would look like. And of course, we get the racial reckoning that happens in May and June of 2020. And at that point, all hands are off, all bets are go. We're like, hey, we need to take this public, because there are people who are wanting this and there are people who are going to be asking questions. And so we took it public in September of 2020. And so since September of 2020, we've been having our monthly meetings. We mentioned that we introduced our subcommittees in March. And as of now in June, our biggest charge now is really operationalizing this and seeing how it is that we can connect with you all as ADIDs and how we can connect with more people who are doing this on a day-to-day basis. And so by the numbers, as of right now, we have 150 plus members who have signed up or are at least consistent in getting some information from DICE. Almost half, or a little more than half, identify as Black African American. 60% are women, and we see that it's pretty consistent with what the Ncaa was seeing, as most of the ADIDs across all 3 divisions are women. We see that a fourth of our members are 4-time DEI professionals, not necessarily in athletics, but just in general. But what's really alarming to us is that 50% of our members are not the ADID. And so we saw pretty early in saying, hey, this is an area that we were trying to be really intentional on connecting with, but we weren't really hitting that mark. And part of that is because of what Ncaa was mentioning earlier with the Ncaa, was that there was a little bit of a lag of people who were being notified that they were even the ADID or signing up to become the ADID. And so we saw that lag in regards of what our members look like as well. For us, as far as the division, is very heavily skewed to Division I, just because those are where the majority of at least the full-time positions have been, and that's where we've talked with the most, but we're trying our best to expand that. Hence why we're working with the Ncaa to try our best to try to connect and be able to show that, hey, this is a resource and this is something that our members have gotten a lot of value out of. And us as the board of directors, we've gotten an immense amount of value just connecting with our DICE members on a monthly basis and almost on an everyday basis in regards to how often we're talking to them and exchanging information with them.
Awesome. Thank you, Dwan, for that background. So as Dwan mentioned, looking forward, our number one goal and why we're just so thankful to be given the platform here is to grow our membership. Again, we are very, very, very person driven, and as people who were in these roles when they first started, is like we knew what it was like to kind of be out on the limb by ourselves. So we are very like you focused. We want to make sure that everyone feels connected because you're not alone. We like all the problems and the things that you're facing. I guarantee you there are many people that are facing that. And we just want to be very, very intentional about continuing to show you that we're here to support you. We created this to support ourselves. I remember our first DICE meetings where it was like 5, 6 of us, and we were just like sharing what was going on. And it was just so enlightening to be in a room with people who know what you're going through, and then to just be able to like learn from each other and work problems out and things like that. It's a fantastic space. So our hope is to grow our membership. For right now, it's been very like word of mouth driven, and also very much like if you're following us on Twitter or following someone on Twitter who's tweeted or who's retweeted or tweeted about us, that's kind of been how we've done our outreach. But this is a great opportunity for you to get engaged with us. So that's one of our big roles, and particularly for the smaller schools. As a very proud Division III student athlete who has the smaller schools have less resources, right? So sometimes it's hard to kind of wrap your arms around how the heck do I do this work? This is a great resource because, again, we're talking about very real problems that apply to everybody across all divisions all the time. The next component that we're going to be tackling is that we are going to be filing as a formal 501c3 structure this summer. So we're really, really excited about that. That will then allow us to continue to partner with MOA and the NCAA and MOIC to just, again, serve all of you and the larger NCAA membership and those that are working in sport, to make sure that we're being really intentional about, again, pouring back into ourselves, because, right, especially as the people, the DEI experts in our spaces, we're often the ones that have to be, we're pouring out all the time. So we really want to spend investment in time and energy and pouring into all of you and ourselves, so that when we do want to go pour out, our cups are full. So really, really excited to develop that and be able to, again, provide some professional development opportunities, hopefully get folks in person, connect all the dots with MOA and MOIC. And we're just really, really excited about that next step. And then the last thing, which we're really, really excited about, is aside from growing our membership, really continuing to make sure that the content and the conversations that we're having are very, very applicable, is to grow our subcommittee growth and impact. So similar in a way to MOA is, and we're going to hopefully partner in the future, is a lot of us are content experts, but we are becoming experts by way of the experiences that we're having. Therefore, we're becoming we have this lens that can really translate all of these kind of concepts and best practices into action. So we're utilizing subcommittees to use our content expertise And then as we're pouring into ourselves through the monthly meetings and professional development, et cetera, how we can come together as a collective and then pour into the larger sport community around us. So the first thing is external relations, and DeJuan's heading this one up for right now, is responsible for the external engagement strategy at DICE. So go follow us on Twitter. We're super excited to grow that. We have lots of great content consistently coming out to highlight what our members are doing, so you can get ideas from that perspective, but then to also be able to elevate and show just some of the great work and the things that are being done within the NCAA. Partnerships and support. If you join that one, you get to hang out with me. But it is doing exactly what we're doing right now, bringing forth, utilizing our platform as DICE to connect with Moa, who has been an organization that's instrumental in both mine and DeJuan's just growth as professionals. How can we partner? How can we use both of our platforms and our experience and our expertise to to take this work to a different level? Membership affairs and professional development, that's the committee that's pouring back in. So this focused on our personal professional development, some of the webinars and the things that we're talking about with NCAA and Moa, like working together to make sure that we can make those things really, really awesome and helpful and actionable for all of us. And then this last one, which again, where a lot of us are building the plane as we're flying, DEI is a newer concept within college sport as of the last couple of years, with a very hyper focus, not to say that people before us have not been like boots on the ground really doing the work, but being recognized in its specific role. How can we come together through these experiences that we're having to engage in helping develop recruitment and retention resources for those that are outside of the DEI space all the time like we are? So those are the subcommittees. Again, is really looking forward to utilizing our platform and content expertise to help the surrounding org and membership be better. So with that being said, finally, we want to just provide contact information. So I encourage you to just take a screenshot of this. We have an email as well, so feel free to reach out to us. Again, plug for our Twitter. And we'll also say that I'm really thankful to have all these emails and things like that, so we can reach out as well. So we appreciate NCAA, MOA, MOIC. We wouldn't be here without you. We're super, super thankful to be working with you, and thank you for giving us this platform.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And so I appreciate you giving the background of both MOA and DICE and how you can support our members here today. And so at this time, I'd like to open up the floor for some questions for any of the panelists that we've had in either organization. Okay, here's one question. Is the role of the conference ADID different from the campus roles?
I'll jump in. Oh, Angel, you go ahead.
I'll start out, Sheridan, and then please jump in right after that. So the role isn't different as it's defined by what the expectations are from the leadership. So from the conference office, the president's group would be the ones that are really setting the standard for how they expect for the conference ADID to function. Whereas on your individual campuses, it's either going to be your athletic director or your senior associate, or possibly it could be you attempting to build it. So you have to make sure that you're reaching out to the decision makers in your office, but also across your campus. Many times the tools that you'd be using in athletics may live someplace on your campus as well. And so the collaboration that we're talking about having amongst our organizations is the same type of collaboration that you need to be having across your campus, so that your student athletes and everyone within your athletic department are having the same shared language that they're seeing across their campus.
Yeah, and just briefly, Angela, you encompass that really well. Just a matter of it being like the point person, I think, to really create the strategy and then be not necessarily the one executing everything, because we recognize that all of us can't do this work alone to do it well. But to really have, we know that if no one has the ball in their hands, no one can shoot the ball. So we really have to be mindful of like, who's the point person? And you have to work with your surrounding folks and with the folks, if you are at the conference level, really working and pulling together the ADIDs from your conference membership and collectively coming together to create that strategy in which everyone will be a part of carrying out.
Is there a membership cost for DICE?
There is no membership cost for DICE. I will say that at some point we may have to look into collecting fees, just because as we file for the 501c3 and build out the website and make sure that we're all legal, there definitely might be some costs associated to that we're not able to pay ourselves as the board. But I will also say that we didn't create DICE to make money. We created DICE to help our community. And that's the reason why we're filing it as a 501c3, because again, for us, it's not about making money. It's about helping the community that is trying to help what college athletics looks like kind of moving forward into our industry.
Thank you. This question may be for the Ncaa staff, but anybody can answer. It says, is the Common Ground Initiative conference only for select colleges or divisions? They said it was spoken about in yesterday's opening session.
So previously Common Ground has been held at specific institutions. And so there's a way that we work out with that currently, because we're redoing it because we're still in the COVID space. And so Abigail is telling me that that's applications. If you go on our website, you can look at applications to apply for the Common Ground experience. Also, if we don't have any questions, Dina, I don't know if you saw my last message in the chat, but we could possibly do, if you all find it beneficial, to do 10-minute breakout rooms where you all can kind of network and chat with each other on a more intimate basis, since we don't have 500 people right now. Okay.
Because we finished a few minutes early, we're going to let everybody go and close out our session. But I'd like to invite our incoming vice chair of MOIC, Harry Stinson, who's the Director of Athletics and Recreational Services at Lincoln University, to close us out today. Harry?
Thank you, Dina. And it's good to see so many familiar faces and so many new folks to the ADID space. And hopefully you got a lot out of today's session. Want to say thank you to Stan and Angel and members of the MOAA for your information today and being with us, along with Dewan and Sheridan of DICE. We greatly appreciate you being involved in today's program, along with your engagement and commitment to resourcing and educating those in the ADID space. Also want to thank you as attendees for your pointed questions and engagement in today's session. It's you and others within this space that are influencing and moving the needle, changing the landscape of this enterprise, using a platform of DE&I and EDI. So with that, want to reiterate to you that MOIC and the Ncaa Office of Inclusion is committed to supporting ADIDs, and we hope that you look to engage with us. If you have any questions or concerns, please touch base.